Discovering my husband's affair was a tough pill to swallow, leading me to the inevitable decision of divorce. The daunting task ahead was figuring out how to break this news to our daughter, Jessica. "I'm so sorry this has happened," was all I could muster up. In response, Jessica clenched her fists, giving me a long, determined look before quietly declaring,
"I can forgive him. I'll make sure he regrets hurting you, Mom."
"What?" I was taken aback by her words. Just a few days after our conversation, in a twist that seemed almost too precise to be coincidental, David, my husband, found himself losing everything. "My name is Elizabeth. I'm a 37-year-old stay-at-home mom who is currently 8 months pregnant. My current husband, David, is 40 years old, and we're in our 2nd year of marriage. We live with our high school freshman daughter, Jessica, forming a family of 3. Current husband comes into play because David is my second husband. My first marriage ended in divorce due to my ex-husband's infidelity when my daughter was 13 years old. Initially, I was determined to live my life without considering remarriage, especially for my daughter's sake. However, I was drawn to David's cheerful and friendly nature. After meeting him at work, and with Jessica's encouragement, I decided to remarry. Having a daughter in her challenging teenage years, I had my concerns, but I was relieved to see how well she and David got along, almost like a real father and daughter, treating each other with mutual respect. David was very understanding about my wish not to change my daughter's school, agreeing to live in the apartment where my daughter and I had been living. This gesture made me feel our marriage was going smoothly. Yet, living together revealed that David highly values his mother's opinions and standards. Above all, it seemed his desire to be acknowledged by his mother was particularly strong. I respect and appreciate his mother, a wonderful person from whom I've learned a lot, especially for accepting me despite my being divorced and having a daughter. Though it felt restrictive to have everything measured against his mother's standards, I thought I was prepared, considering my previous marriage's failure. However, David's demands seemed endless, and I constantly felt criticized, never quite meeting his expectations. Our relationship faced its greatest challenge when my pregnancy became apparent and my belly began to show. Eventually, David stopped coming home. At first, he would answer my calls, but then he stopped responding to voicemails and emails. Being pregnant at 37 and watching my belly grow, my anxiety soared. Nonetheless, this wasn't my first pregnancy, and having Jessica meant I had to keep pushing through. But the ultimate blow came when David returned only to hand me divorce papers. "What is this?" I found myself asking, a wave of confusion washing over me.
"What do you mean? What? It's a divorce paper. Surely, you've seen one before,"
he replied, a hint of impatience in his voice. "A divorce? Just like that? Why?" My voice trembled with a mixture of surprise and fear, as the words barely left my mouth.
"Why, I've simply lost all sense of value in us being together as a couple,"
he answered coldly, his words slicing through the air like ice. "What on earth are you thinking? Can't you see I'm carrying your child at this very moment?" I pleaded, my voice breaking, teeming with tears that threatened to spill.
"Oh, enough. The very child you're carrying is the issue here. To think at 37, you're having a child,"
he retorted with a flare of anger, his frustration evident.
"I detest the sight of that unsightly large belly to the extent that I avoid coming home. And yet, you incessantly reach out to me,"
he added, his words heavy with disdain. "Is that truly the sole reason? You genuinely believe I'm oblivious to everything?" I questioned him, a calm demeanor masking my turmoil.
"What?"
He seemed taken aback, confusion etched on his face. "You've got someone else you're living with now, haven't you? Are you intending to marry her?" I inquired, my tone even yet probing.
"So, you knew. Well, there's no sense in concealing it anymore, given the circumstances. Just go ahead. Sign the papers and submit the divorce.
He declared, his decision final. With those parting words, he thrust the divorce papers at me and exited the house, leaving a silence that hung heavy in the air. How did things come to this? Perhaps remarrying was a mistake after all. To undergo infidelity and face another divorce. What explanation could I possibly offer to my daughter? And now, with a new life burgeoning within me, as I held the divorce papers my husband had left behind, I was engulfed in a state of utter bewilderment. Then, the sound of the front door opening once more broke the silence, as my daughter made her way into the living room. Noticing me collapsed on the sofa, she regarded me with concern, slowly approaching.
Mom, are you not feeling well? Is everything okay?
She inquired, worry lacing her voice. Welcome back, I'm fine, I reassured her, managing a weak smile.
I just saw Dad leaving as I arrived. Did something happen?
She pressed, seeking answers. How do I even begin to explain this to my daughter? As I stood, contemplating, a sudden, dull pain surged through my abdomen, causing me to crumple to the floor.
Mom!
She exclaimed, panic-stricken. Jessica, call an ambulance. I whispered, my voice barely audible, as my daughter's cries seemed to fade into the distance, and darkness enveloped me. The moment I regained consciousness, I immediately realized that I was in a hospital bed.
Mom, are you awake?
She could hear the worried voice of her daughter, who was sitting next to her bed. She leaned closer, searching my eyes for any sign of consciousness. A wave of relief was visibly washing over her as she spoke. I'm really sorry for causing you worry, I muttered, barely above a whisper.
Why are you apologizing? Your health is the most important thing, right?
She retorted, her tone a mixture of concern and mild reprimand. Is the baby okay? I asked, shifting her body slightly to gauge her reaction.
The baby is perfectly fine, Mom. But the doctor said not to move too much. Promise you will stay still.
She insisted, her point emphasized by the warmth that filled the room. I nodded and answered wholeheartedly. Got it. I took a moment to study her face again. The look on her face was a mixture of emotions I had never seen before. Jessica, I have to tell you something important. Your father and I are getting a divorce. She revealed that the words were heavier than she expected.
I know, I saw the divorce papers on the table.
Her voice was steady, but there was sadness in her eyes. I'm sorry for seeing you like this, I added, the weight of the situation bearing down on me. Her daughter's response was silence. Her lips pressed tightly together as if holding back a sea of words. Then she clenched her fists, a determination that tightened her features.
I can never forgive him,
she declared in a low but fierce voice. Jessica, I prompted her, surprised by the intensity of her statement.
He made you unhappy. I'm sure you regret it.
She swore quietly. Her determination was evident in the tense atmosphere of her hospital room. Without another word, she stands up and quickly leaves the room, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the slow beeping of my monitor. From that day on, she visited the hospital every day, bringing essential supplies, but then always leaving quickly and avoiding further conversation. I longed to hold her back and dig into her true meaning behind her words that day. But all she offered was a smile on her face and said,
Mom, all you need to focus on right now is making sure your baby is doing well.
In the end, I spent 2 months in the hospital until she gave birth with the support of not only my parents and Jessica, but also my in-laws who stood by me even after my divorce. I was able to safely bring a new life into this world. On the day of my discharge from the hospital, I was accompanied by my daughter, Jessica, who had just given birth to my grandson. As we were about to step into our home, I felt a sudden grip on my shoulder from behind. Turning around, I found myself face to face with my unexpected visitor, my ex-husband David, glaring at us with an intensity that took me aback. What on earth do you want now? I demanded, struggling to make sense of his uninvited presence. Jessica was holding her newborn son in her arms, so I suggested her to go inside, but her voice trembled with uncertainty. David, however, had other ideas. He smirked at the sight of his grandson, his smile laced with an airy sense of triumph that I couldn't decipher.
So, you have a new addition to the family.
He remarked, his tone suggesting an opening for reconciliation.
I might consider getting back together with you.
He boldly offered, as if it was some kind of favor. Confused and outraged, I countered. What are you talking about? David's proposal was ludicrous. He went on to say that he could forgive Jessica's actions if I agreed to remarry him.
Forgive? What are you even saying? How dare you show your face here after everything?
She retorted, her voice echoing with disbelief and anger. David warned her about her tone, but before he could finish, a young man, Joshua, Jessica's age, intervened with swift and decisive action. He grabbed and twisted David's arm, preventing him from causing any harm.
You have no right to hurt Jessica,
Joshua declared, his presence a surprising but welcome support. As neighbors began to gather, drawn by the commotion, I felt torn. I didn't want David anywhere near our home, but causing a scene at the doorstep was equally undesirable. Reluctantly, I allowed everyone inside, all the while keeping a vigilant eye on David to ensure he didn't harm Jessica or her baby. Once in the living room, I carefully laid my grandson on a makeshift bed and faced David squarely. So, are you really bringing this up now? That chapter of us is already closed, David. I have no intention of revisiting it.
I don't care what you want.
You can't ignore my feelings and expect me to comply.
Enough is enough. Your decisions have cost me everything, and you should pay for that.
Lost everything? What the hell are you talking about?
And correct the story you told my mom about her daughter. My mom refuses to even look at me.
She gave David a measured, cold look.
I just told my grandparents the truth. If you think that's why you lost everything, you're just reaping what you sow. This has nothing to do with your mom.
What did you say?
Please, both of you, take a step back. I'm completely out of the loop. Can we start from the beginning? Jessica agreed with her resigned sigh, and her story began to unfold. Her suspicions about David's faithfulness, or lack thereof, had begun to take root 3 months earlier.
Remember when David became distant after I got pregnant? He was acting strange and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong.
Her intuition told her that all was not well, she said. To confirm her suspicions, he needed to face her unpleasant truth head-on. After being consistently ignored, Jessica takes matters into her own hands and visits David's office, where she witnesses him having an intimate affair with another woman. Choosing caution over confrontation, she followed them silently, her heart sinking with each step.
This man brazenly greeted the neighbors and entered the apartment. He was convinced that he was already living together with a woman who was walking arm in arm with him.
This was a betrayal that cut deep into the fabric of the family. Jessica's first instinct was to encourage her mother to divorce her immediately. However, considering her mother's condition and the impending arrival of her new life, she chose to wait in hope for a more appropriate time to reveal her sad truth. Unfortunately, David went ahead of me and filed for her divorce and walked away, an act that led to my subsequent hospitalization.
My real dad was involved in affairs too, wasn't he? Mom always put on a brave face, making sure I never saw her sadness. Yet, I knew she was deeply hurt, often crying in secret. That's why I've always had a distaste for the notion of a father, believing I never needed one. However, Mom began to find happiness again after meeting David, which made me reconsider my stance slightly. I thought, maybe David is the one who can truly make Mom happy. I was ready to trust him. But he ended up betraying Mom. That betrayal solidified my resolve. I could never forgive him. So, I decided to take matters into my own hands to ensure David pays for causing Mom pain. I vowed never to let him find happiness. During my quest for justice, I stumbled upon Joshua.
It's funny, Jessica and I attended the same high school. I had been curious about her because of her last name, wondering if she was related to David ever since I started there. I'm actually his son, though my mom refused to acknowledge it. They were close to marriage, but David never introduced her to his parents. As her belly grew, he refused to accept responsibility, claiming there was no proof the child was his.
Despite a DNA test later proving Joshua's paternity, the emotional damage had already been done.
The rejection at a time when support was most needed killed any love she had for him, leading her to refuse acknowledging his paternity.
Joshua shares the complexity of his relationship with David.
Despite everything, she allowed me to see him because he's still my father. You're getting older. David recounted the past without a hint of guilt.
Discovering David's new family added insult to injury for Joshua.
To learn he rejected us yet started another family, I was filled with indignation rather than shock.
Initially mistaking Jessica for another byproduct of David's indiscretions, Joshua confronts her with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism.
At first, I thought Jessica might be my sister from another woman David had been with. So I asked her directly, "Your dad is David, right?"
Jessica's response and the subsequent revelations draw them closer, uniting them in a shared goal.
I clarified I was my mom's daughter, without blood ties to him. But sensing the weight of Joshua's story, I felt compelled to dig deeper. The very idea of infidelity was unbearable.
Their alliance forms out of a shared desire for justice, marking the beginning of their collaborative effort.
So, we decided to team up.
Their first mission, to uncover the truth about David's affair, but it turned out the woman involved was led to believe David was single. Calling her the affair partner somehow felt unjust. Yet, she eventually realized she was entangled with a married man. Their conversation with her, coupled with her honesty, convinces them of her innocence and their mother's suffering. They encouraged her to seek reparations from David, facilitating her in sending a legal notice to his family and workplace. This act of defiance brings David's misdeeds to light, causing his professional and personal downfall. A poignant moment of reckoning for Elizabeth and Joshua.
We only did what we thought was right, sharing with others who might suffer like our mothers did, advising them of their rightful claims.
He asserted with a sense of justice.
The lies about being single and causing distress to our moms, it was all him. He has no right to harbor any resentment.
She added, her voice laced with indignation. Exactly, I concurred. Blaming us is utterly misguided. It's astonishing that you lack even the basic decency that these teenagers have. You're not fit to be a parent, let alone be in a relationship with a woman, I declared, my words cutting through the air. Afterward, I took the initiative to contact his parents, kindly requesting they take him back. The gaze his mother, whom he cherished dearly, cast upon him was icy, reflecting her profound disappointment. Despite wanting nothing more than to sever ties, I realized he had nowhere else to go but back to his parents' home. Eventually, his parents agreed to compensate us with $35,000 for their son's actions, and even offered to cover our moving expenses. Although it's unlikely they could monitor him indefinitely, I appreciated their gesture and accepted their offer graciously. Understanding he had no interest in our daughter's high school, we moved to another state to ensure her safety and a fresh start. Even though it meant she had to transfer schools. I heard that his son and his mother moved a few months later due to her job relocation. To prevent him from finding us, I made sure to restrict access to our personal records diligently. My daughter and his son continue their correspondence as email friends. When asked if it would be all right for her brother to visit, I welcomed the idea. And even my daughter seemed pleased. If only our paths had never crossed with him. But my daughter insists he's just a friend she gets along with well. I'm committed to improving my judgment of character, aiming for a happier life for the three of us as a family.